First of all, Merry Christmas to you and your family. And if you're spending it alone, as I mentioned at the top of the show, as I know many of you will be, I especially send you my warmest wishes at a time of the year when things can feel particularly tough. So the big day is almost here, and it's a chance for us to regroup after what has been a particularly challenging year. On the political front, we've seemingly not only lost control of illegal migration, but the Tories have allowed more than 700,000 to come here legally, despite our housing, infrastructure and local services bursting at the seams. Our country is changing at a rapid and uncomfortable pace, and I know that's a cause for concern for many of you. Meanwhile, we've been dealing with an onslaught of wars and violence with Ukraine, Russia and latterly Israel, Gaza. And just this week, we had that terrible news of the census mass shooting in Prague. Economically, we've been savaged by rising interest rates and the cost of living that's left us more skint than ever before. Who knew that insane money printing during COVID would leave us with crippling inflation? Everyone but the central banks, it seems. And elsewhere, greedy energy companies have jumped on the chance to squeeze every last pound from our already empty wallets by using Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an excuse. Wholesale prices, by the way, have collapsed, but our bills are yet to do the same. So look, I get it. I understand if you're running a little low on enthusiasm for 2024, but I want to remind you that the worst of life is always magnified in such a way that we're convinced there's no good in the world, that the majority of people are bad, and the cards are dealt against you. But I want to tell you now, it's my belief that it couldn't be further from the truth. We have more in common with each other than not. There's an abundance of good taking place on a daily basis that's not being talked about. And despite endless headlines of war and violence, I'm bullish on the world achieving peace in 2024. And I'll tell you why. It comes when Donald Trump will likely win his long-awaited return to the White House. There'll be plenty who scoff at that statement and no doubt spit out their muesli as they cry, "Orange man bad." He's off the cuff. He's not everyone's cup of tea. And actually, I'm no fan of his performance during COVID, his vaccine programme, or the fact he allowed Anthony Fauci to get the better of him. But let's get the facts straight. After 4 years in office, Donald Trump proved himself the anti-war president, becoming the first in decades who did not commit the US to more overseas military campaigns. Unlike the Obamas and Bushes before him, Trump preferred to use economic might and crippling sanctions to strong-arm despots like Putin, who threatened to kick off. He was the first ever president to meet a North Korean leader and cross into the demilitarized zone, taming so-called rocket man Kim Jong-un as he got trigger-happy with ballistic missiles. And he's already said that he could end the Russia-Ukraine war within 24 hours if he was president. So what's the alternative? Well, Britain-hating Joe Biden, whose alleged Irish ancestry leaves him with disdain for our country. He's recently ruled out a free trade agreement with the UK, while this week gave the green light to Ireland to try and prosecute our Troubles veterans by scuttling off to the ECHR. In 2020, he snubbed an interview with the BBC, snapping, "The BBC? I'm Irish." While in May, just this year, he said his visit to Ireland was made to ensure Rishi Sunak, quote, "didn't screw around with the Good Friday Agreement." I think Arlene Foster was right when she said Biden has a, quote, "deep hatred of the United Kingdom." Trump, meanwhile, is the polar opposite, a Brit-loving American whose mother was a fond fan of the late Queen and who'll have us front of the queue for a trade deal. So it's no surprise that The Telegraph reported this week that ministers are pinning their hopes on a Trump election victory next year. And with Starmer already seemingly packing his bags for Downing Street, God knows we and the world need him. Merry Christmas.